You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
This is Force 13 live, and seems like we're going through deja vu as December 2020 had us going through Fanphone and Kamuri. This year, December 2021, we're dealing with Typhoon Rai. Seems like, again, deja vu all over again for the Philippines and this Force 13 team. My name is Timothy Ringo. We will be with you for the next 90 minutes covering Typhoon Rai and all it is going to be bringing for the Philippines. We will also touch briefly on what has now been designated post-tropical cyclone Ruby down in the South Pacific. We do have a lot going on with this storm, so we're going to fade our team in, which consists of a very big group this evening. We have Christian, Ken, Josh, and Ethan. Good evening, guys. And what are your guys' thoughts on what has now been upgraded to Typhoon Rai as of the last JMA update?
Well, it's been a very interesting situation as it's approached the Philippines here. Does appear that some significant intensification may be ongoing. I know that there was a microwave pass which just posted. I'm not sure if you can pull that up, Tim, or which is it's called.
I can do that. I'll do that right now.
But that microwave pass did indicate a developing eye wall, and so suddenly something is going on underneath those cloud tops right now, which are mainly on the eastern side of the circulation. The western side is a little bit. I mean, it's got some cloud tops to it, but not like the eastern side. But nonetheless, this is a Category 1 typhoon. Right now, I would probably estimate this to be around 75 knots. That's 85 miles per hour. Given that SAP right now is at a 4.5 fix, which is around 75 to 80 knots, 85 to 90 miles an hour. And the JTWC, for whatever reason, are going with a Dvorak fix of 3.5, which is high-end tropical storm, which this isn't a tropical storm right now. So, don't know what they're on about.
Looking at the microwave imagery, it's certainly got, I mean, for a tropical storm, that's got a very good eye wall, but it's certainly not a tropical storm right now. The Category 1 is certainly the best estimate that we can come up with right now based off all of what we have. The microwave imagery, I believe the eye wall is forming just fine. You can also note that there's quite a powerful banding feature on the western side, might even be some kind of double eye wall. I'm not too good with microwave imagery, but it does look like we might have patches of a second eye wall trying to develop. That could be good news for the Philippines. If we do get the second eye wall, it means that the storm will be a little bit more susceptible to its environment, which means that if we do get an increase in shear, we might have the storm's structure collapse, or it might be undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle just before landfall. But then again, it could still continue to rapidly intensify. It's not a good situation to be in if you are in the Philippines where this storm's going to be making landfall. This is quite a serious storm threat. And I guess we're sort of just holding on to every bit of hope now that we might see a weaker storm than what we've sort of been expecting. But with the latest trend in development, especially over the last couple of hours, any sort of weakening would be good right now. Any sort of weakening before landfall would be good.
Absolutely, Josh.
I will know right now.
Go for it, Ethan.
Go ahead, Tom. Thank you. Shear right now is around 10 knots or so. It's been hovering around there for the last 6 hours or so. But shear is going to gradually rise as it approaches the Philippines. By 0Z tonight, going into the 16th, wind shear is forecast to be about 20 knots. I imagine that's right about when the storm should be plowing through the Philippines. So I mean,
That's
JWTC right now are forecasting what, 90 knots part of the Philippines? I'm
90
not even sure if it'll even get that high with 20 knots of wind shear. I mean, one problem in the eye wall, and then the eye wall is gone pretty much for this storm. I mean, with wind shear, which has sort of been up and down. I mean, it hasn't even been below 10 knots since the storm formed. You're really going to have to monitor the situation closely because it's very uncertain on what happens.
Well, speaking of the JTWC forecast, Ethan, we do have it on screen. Looking like at 18Z on the 18th, JTWC has it at 105 knots. Now, I'm not entirely sure if that is with it being over the Philippine Islands or if it's past the Philippine Islands at that point.
That's in the South China Sea.
All right.
The South China Sea, again, they could really be seeing a significant storm out of this because I believe in the South China Sea, conditions are optimum for tropical cyclones, and well, this storm, as it moves into the JTWC, into the South China Sea, we will definitely be seeing some strengthening out of this storm, and I would not be ruling out significant strengthening. With the JTWC going for Category 3, I certainly believe that it could do that in the favourable conditions that the South China Sea is harbouring.
And again,
there are two things.
Go for it.
Thank you. Sorry. There are two things that I would like to say about Rai real quick, though. First things first. JTWC only weakens this 5 miles an hour over the Philippines. That's not going to happen at all. It's going to weaken more than 5 miles an hour. Second thing is, the 105 knot peak in the South China Sea, 120 miles per hour, is very, very interesting. While yes, this does suggest a stronger storm that might affect areas later on, you have to look back at climatology data, because storms, it's not too uncommon to see a storm reach a secondary peak or even a third peak intensity, maybe even for some storms, in the South China Sea, and then sort of just loop around and fizzle out in there. And that's probably what the storm's going to do. So
that's what the models have been saying. It's going to loop, it's going to peak, then it's going to start looping around itself.
Yep, that wouldn't really surprise me that much. So certainly, once the storm gets into the South China Sea, there's going to be a lot of rough surf along the coastlines of Vietnam and China and other countries, but won't really be that much after the storm starts weakening after its supposed second peak.
And speaking of forecast, we got the JMA forecast on screen now, as this is where we got the reason to upgrade to Typhoon Status. They have it at 65 knots, pressure 975 millibars. That's basically what we've ran with on our numbers there. Taking a look at their forecast, they do have it running out to about 80 knots, 955, just before it starts getting into the southern Leyte and Agusan Islands, and does weaken it significantly back down to still a minimal typhoon at about 70 knots, 80 miles an hour, before going through the last part of the Philippine Islands, and then does get out into the South China Sea, where the JMA possibly has this not intensifying as much, maybe 80 knots just to the south of Vietnam. From there, it's really a toss-up if southern Vietnam or maybe up towards Hainan or maybe even towards Macau or Hong Kong could take a brunt of this later on down the road. And again, like we said at the top of the show, December is not unusual for us to have tropical cyclone activity in this area. We had Phanphone and Kamuri both last year making some pretty heavy impacts in the Philippines in the month of December.
And that was 2019, Tim.
Was it 2019? God, I'm getting my years messed up. Doesn't help that I am doing this on less than 100%. So again, apologize to the viewers if I get some of my facts mixed up. That's why we have this team to help make sure I'm staying on point.
But nonetheless, I mean, while yes, the JMA cone might be that huge, I think it's more so just huge just to show like the potential impacts, because I mean, if I were to make a forecast cone, I probably wouldn't even include I might include like a little bit of the coast of Vietnam in a forecast cone, but other than that, not really. I mean, the Vietnam coastline, worst case scenario I'm seeing is maybe strong tropical storm force winds. That's really about it.
Yep, and just take a look at the rainfall forecast. This is off the HWRF, which obviously the HWRF does like to be a little bit aggressive with the rainfall forecast. I doubt we're going to get 51 inches anywhere across the Philippines, but some spots could get 16 to 24 inches in some places through most of the Leyte and Asogan Islands as those go through in the next 24 to 36 hours. So
now, I do know that we do have. Go for that.
No, go for it.
Well, I do know that we have signal warnings in effect for the Philippines. I'm not sure where exactly they are, so I imagine one of our Philippine people in this live room could tell me or give it a little bit of help information. But I know that there are signal warnings in effect for the eastern Philippines, though.
Well, thankfully, Ethan, I came prepared. We do have the Signal 1 warnings as of their last update. We do have Signal 1 warnings for all of Samar, Bilaran, Leyte, Southern Leyte, to the Camotes Islands, to the Batian Islands, down to Cebu, Bohol, to Dingagat Island, which is where we can see a potential landfall at, down into the Surigaos, into the Camiguins, and to the Amisawamis, and to the Agusans. And I do apologize if I mispronounced any of those regions. Some of our Philippine team members can correct my pronunciation on the geography if they would like to do so.
Agusan.
Oh, Agusan? Okay, thank you.
Well, right now I can say that the JMA forecast looks to bring this over Ciargo Island just about 2 days from now. So this isn't really moving that fast off towards the west right now. JMA had this moving, where is it? At west at 12 knots, which is just above 15 miles an hour. So this is not moving that fast off towards the west. So, I mean, you have time to prepare for this system. But once this moves into Ciargo Island, looks to make another landfall potentially on Nonok Island, and then it'll pass over a couple more islands, and will eventually pass through the central part of the Philippines.
And
Just going to cut in right here.
Go for it.
With a little bit of promotion. We're live on the Facebook page right now, on the Philippines Facebook page. So if you have not joined us, Force 13 on Facebook, you can do so. There'll be a link in the description for the Facebook page for the Philippines. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well and leave a like on the stream while you're at it, looking for those 2 bits of information.
And I believe that is because we have our own David simulcasting over on to the Philippines page.
I do think so. Yeah, David is simulcasting on the Philippines page. But let's, of course, get back to the elephant in the room, that being Typhoon Rai.
Yeah, and I think we've covered as much as we can. We'll kind of try to keep digging up information. So if on either venues, on YouTube or on the Philippines Facebook, if you guys have any questions for us, now's the time to ask you. You can tag us at Force 13, all in text, while you guys are coming up with your questions. We will take a look down here in the South Pacific, just briefly, at this sad swirl that is what is now been designated as post-tropical cyclone Ruby. Looks pretty sad looking off of Ram MB. You can actually see it there.
Oh yeah, I mean, radar suggested that it looked kind of a bit interesting as it was going on its way of exiting New Caledonia, was trying to rebuild an eyewall, believe it or not, but ultimately it, well, look at it now. I mean, it's headed for the post-tropics. It's getting absorbed right now by the tail end of another post-tropical cyclone down near New Zealand. And I imagine, I don't know, in a day or so, this will be just a tale of other disappointment in the South Pacific.
Yeah, the Fiji Met does have this coming down towards the northern edge of New Zealand in about 2 or 3 days. So we might see some blustery conditions come to New Zealand from the remnants of Ruby. Again, we said we were going to talk about Ruby briefly. That's about all you're going to get on it, as JTWC has designated this as a post-tropical cyclone. Estimates right now are still 60 miles per hour at 987 millibars for that system. So there's your briefing on Ruby. That's about all we're going to say on that one. Now we're going to go back to obviously what is our biggest threat, and that is Typhoon Rai.
I'm just trying to find a decent comparison to this storm, and I can't really find any in the month of December, to be honest. I mean, maybe, oh, let's see here, maybe like a much more weaker, maybe more southerly Knock 10, maybe? That's about the best I could give, to be honest. I mean, I don't really know December typhoons in the Philippines that well, but I know that all I can say is that December typhoons in the Philippines do have a tendency to be quite deadly. So certainly it is very important that you pay attention to the system and take the necessary precautions.
Now, I'm trying to remember. I don't think we had any typhoons impact the Philippines in 2020 off the top of my head.
In
Well,
December, we had
Provan.
Provan, which moved through the precursor to it moved through the Philippines. Didn't really do that much, but
drop heavy rainfall.
that was about it.
So then,
That's-
really, the last
I mean-
time that the Philippines has taken a December typhoon intense system would be back December 2019 with Fanphone and Kamuri.
I would be much more reluctant to compare this to
Oh, no.
Fanphone.
Oh no, I'm not saying that they are similar to those, but that would be like the most recent recorded typhoons that have hit this area in December.
Yeah. It is quite challenging to find like a storm that's quite similar to this because there's been a lot of bad typhoons in December. Not saying this isn't going to be one, but just saying that this is certainly a pretty significant threat to the Philippines, though.
Let's take a look back, see if we have any questions from our team. Well, we do have someone in our chat. First time watching live. Thanks for the info. I'm glad we could actually bring the information to you. This is what we do day in and day out when we have systems like this. Is we either do updates, post them on our social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, or if you're on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13, you'll see our information posted there. And when the situation warrants it, we do we do storm updates, which you can find a lot of them on our Force 13 YouTube page. And we do live events just like this one. So welcome to the Force 13 fan club. Glad to have you on board. Looking at other questions. Okay, here's some questions going on. Exotic TS asking, will this be a typhoon category all the way throughout the island passage to the Philippines? I live in Borjo and considering to prepare. Yeah, most forecasts do have this maintaining at least minimal typhoon all the way through the islands. So in terms of preparation, you probably want to prepare for at least signal 2 conditions. That would be my best recommendation.
I would say worst case scenario that we see signal wise for the Philippines is signal 4. Right now, I think Pagasa is hitting signal 3. I think.
Yeah, based on with the wind peaking at maybe at, by my estimate, I think 120, 125 miles an hour at the very least. I would be inclined to think that would go at least signal 3. I can't see them going signal 4s until we get about 140, I think.
Yeah. So certainly a pretty dangerous situation, though.
All right, we got a 2-part question. This is in relation to the South Pacific. 2-part question. Why wasn't the storm that was designated Ruby named Cody as the South Pacific name? And where's the border between the Australian region and the South Pacific? I believe Ruby was designated by the Fiji Met, weren't they?
By the Bureau of Meteorology, by BOM.
Oh, BOM designated it? Okay.
Yeah.
So
the
yeah.
The border is around 165 east, I think.
Okay. That answers that question. We do have a question asking about CDPS. What's the CDPS we're going with Rai Odette? We checked it with our own CDPS expert, Devin. We are running with CDPS Stage 5 for Typhoon Rai at this time. Somebody asking if we think Typhoon Neil of 1993 is a good comparison to this storm. I'm not really much of a historian on Typhoon Neil. I'm not well versed in the West Pacific, and I'm not sure if any of the rest of our team is that versed in it. So I can't really say for sure. Question asking, will this affect Southern China or Vietnam? Right now, it's really hard to say at this point. Right now, Rai is well outside of the JMA and JTWC's cone after 5 days. So to speculate whether it hit China or Vietnam would be irresponsible of us. But you get 6, 7, 8 days down the road, the confidence is very low, but it cannot be ruled out. And we're already starting to see comparisons to this to being maybe asking if it's going to be like Fanphone or Kamuri. Right now, I can't see enough evidence right now to support a comparison with Fanphone or Kamuri. How does the rest of the team feel?
I agree.
So not enough there to support it being like Fanphone or Kamuri. All right. And we got a little interesting graphic here. And we'll put this up here. And this kind of gives a little bit of context of December tropical cyclones here. And this is a bit interesting, so we'll throw this up here. I believe this was dug up by one of our team members on here. So these are the tropical cyclones that have formed almost in the same location in December. And there's a good list of them there. Severe tropical storm Ursula in 2019. Obviously, that was Fanphone, Philippine name Ursula. You have, looks like that is Super Typhoon Pablo in 2012. Tropical storm Sangdong in 2011, which that got the Philippine name of Washi. Tropical storm Trining. Looks like a tropical storm 16 of 1953. And Typhoon Betty of 1949. So that's just a little history there of some of the storms that have formed in this area of the Philippine area of responsibility historically in the month of December. Okay, and we do have some clarification from our own Christian regarding a question on why Ruby got its name. Ruby was designated by the Bureau of Meteorology. Cody is a Fiji Met name and was named in the bomb response bin and crossed over. Therefore, it keeps its AU name. That's very similar to what happens now in the Northern Hemisphere. If we get an Atlantic name system or a Pacific name system that crosses into the other basin, but the circulation is still discernible, where it does keep its same name. So that's what my understanding from way it's being explained by our own team. That's pretty much what happened is bomb named it, crossed into the Fiji responsibility, and it kept its name. So that should help clarify that naming designation confusion.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions off of the Philippines Facebook that we can address?
Yeah, I have one from Mohammed. Is category 4 ruled out already since the JTWC has reduced its first peak intensity forecast?
Okay, so the question is category 4 possible due to the JTWC lowering their forecast? I'll be honest, I wouldn't rule it out considering JTWC does have it peaking at 105 knots, which would put it right about 120 miles per hour. Obviously, category 4 starts at 130, so that's not a far reach if Rai can really get its act together out in the South China Sea, that we could see Category 4 happen. Now, will we see it between now and landfall in the Philippines? Probably not, as most forecasts from the JMA and JTWC have this peaking at maybe 100, 105 miles per hour. So if there's any chance it's going to hit Cat 4, it's going to be out in the South China Sea. And just take a look, see if we have any other questions coming in from the viewers. Okay, we got a question asking, what will the impact look like in Mactan Island? I'm in Cebu. Well, right now, Cebu is under Signal 1 warnings. Good chance that by the time Rai gets to Cebu, it should be weakening considerably. And the impact should not be nearly as bad as it would be, say, if you're in the eastern islands like Dingaton and all that. And I probably just butchered that. There's one for the blooper reel. Yeah, Dingalan Islands. That's what I meant.
Dinagat.
Dinagat. See, this is why we have native. This is why we try to have native people on for these areas. They can help correct my pronunciation. Okay, we got a question asking, will it impact... See, it's Iloilo City. I'm not entirely sure where that is at.
Iloilo is in Palay Island.
Okay, one more time with that.
It's in Panay Island.
Panay Island. Okay.
It's northwest of Negros.
Okay, I'm not seeing it on my signal warnings list, so that's probably, what, further west from where our signal 1 warnings are?
It's not under a tropical cyclone wind signal yet.
Okay. Yeah, if you're in Iloilo City, that is, you're not under a signal warning just yet. So that will be further down the line. All right, we do have a question asking, what are the current wind fields? According to the JTWC, and I actually do not have it pulled up in front of me. How much I'm slacking right now. Look like I can get this up right quick. Okay, according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, of course, this is outdated a little bit as they only had it at 60 knots. Tropical storm force winds were extending out 235 nautical miles to the northeast, 100 miles to the southeast, 105 miles to the southwest, and 180 miles to the northwest. This is not taking into the fact that the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has not recognized Rai as a typhoon as of yet. However, they probably will be updating that on their next advisory. JMA, however, does recognize it as a typhoon and does have it currently at 80 miles per hour, 1 minute sustained, wind 65 knots, 10 minutes sustained. Let's see here. How big is Typhoon Rai? Well, we can kind of get an idea using some real Earth information here. If we go from the southern influence, which would be just the southern edge here, and we'll stop it on the last frame here. If you count the southern influence down here, we just go all the way out. So just the cloud line is just a little over about 2,200 kilometers. If you go just from the southern to northernmost outflow. Now, if you just go by the storm itself, you're looking at probably at most just about 940 kilometers. So it is a fairly decent sized system overall. And if you just go by the central desk overcast, where we're seeing the most intense part, about 260 kilometers. So that should give you an idea of just about how big this storm is. All right, we do have a question asking, will this make landfall in Mindanao? I would say right now, I think Mindanao is too far south for Rai to make a direct landfall. However, I would not rule out some tropical storm force conditions impacting the Mindanao area as it does go through the area. Let's see here. Go for it.
I think we have a new question for in the Philippine stream.
Okay.
What's the probability that this typhoon will turn more on the north and hit Bicol region?
Well, we would have to take a look at the forecasts on these, and we can do that. As we'll take a look at the JTWC forecast here. And you can see it there. It's a really wide breadth as to what the JTWC has. I mean, even the extreme outlier has up to central Luzon into it. So, Bicol region definitely within the potential cone. But I would probably say for it to make that sharp of a turn north and go up towards the Bicol and the Luzon region, it would really have to take something substantial to get it to pull that far north. I mean, both the JMA and JTWC are pretty confident that this is going to go through the central part of the Philippines and out into the South China Sea. I mean, that's what the JTWC is showing, and then you can compare it with the JMA. I don't want to say it's in almost complete agreement, but there is some pretty good confidence there. And the JMA doesn't even consider Luzon and up towards Mindoro and all that being a possibility. About the most they have it is maybe going through Mindoro at the very least on the northernmost part of their forecast. All right, we have a question coming. Is there a low in Malaysia and can it become a system? Oh, we can certainly take a look, see if there's anything up by Malaysia.
97W.
Yeah, 97W.
And that would be back behind Rai, correct?
No. It's in the South China Sea.
Okay, so that would be this little system that we've got here. That would be this system just to the south of the Philippines, not the Philippines, south of Vietnam, that the sun is just now rising over. That is what I believe is 97W. Yeah, you can see Malaysia down through there. This could possibly get over towards Thailand. And if I've heard some of the discussion that this may cross over Thailand and end up in the Bay of Bengal in the near future, if some of the information I'm hearing is correct. And we do have another question in asking, will Tacloban be affected by the storm? Tacloban right now is under signal 1 warnings at this time. Good chance that they may catch a pretty significant amount of Rai as it comes through. And we can just throw the signal warnings back up right quick just for some context. If you have any other questions that are coming in that I may have missed.
I have reports of rough surf in Samar.
Okay, so we do now have observations of rough surf in Samar. So that would be up in the northern and eastern Samar regions where we do have signal 1 warnings in place. And we'll actually zoom back in on the real Earth side here so we can really get a better look at how Rai's been looking as of late. We'll point out a few of the islands here just for context of where this is all at, because it wants to load up.
I have friends in the eastern Visayas region and they're already getting some amount of rain from Rai.
Yeah, that would not surprise me. Some of the outflow of Rai is starting to come into the Philippines area here, and I'll zoom this back out just a little bit more so we can get this to load in correctly here. So to put some context, and we'll stop this on the last frame here, and then we'll zoom in here. So you've got Samar up in this area. You have Leyte back down in through this area, leading down to the southern Leyte. You have Dinagat Island down here. You have the Surigos down in this area. You have Bohol. You have Cebu in this area. So that kind of gives you a context of where some of these areas are already being influenced. Looking like right now, eastern Samar and down into Leyte already getting some heavy thunderstorm activity from some of this outflow of Rai.
Yes, there's moderate rain being reported right now in Leyte, Tolosa.
All right, so yeah, we do have some confirmed reports of some heavy rain in and around the area of Rai. And just taking a look at how this looks structurally, I mean, this does look like a very well developing system. A lot of minus 80s and 85 showing up. Maybe a few patches of minus 90 trying to show up there on the last couple frames there. So Rai,
Tropical storm.
go for it.
I have the tropical storm force wind probabilities up.
Okay, we will get that on air here right quick. As soon as it loads. All right, that is on screen. Go ahead and show us what you got, Ken.
Yes, it's there. I think it's saying that Visayas is around the tropical storm, around the 50%, 60% area that will have a chance to get tropical storm force winds. And I think that's Manila that under the 5% that has a chance of getting tropical storm force winds from Rai. And along with Vietnam coastline and Hainan.
All right, so yeah, that is the tropical storm force probabilities there that Ken is showing. Looking like almost maybe a 91% chance that we'll get tropical storm force winds right there in Dinagat Island going in through, looks like central Leyte there. That's what, right about 85%. Like, looks like maybe 70% into southern Samar, down to about 40% in northern Samar, and a good chunk of Cebu, probably right around 73% for tropical storm force winds. And then looking out beyond that, you can see Vietnam right at about 10 or 15%, and Hainan right at about the 4 to 5% range. So that is what we do see for tropical storm force winds going out for about the next 5 days.
Yep.
And we did have a question coming in asking on what some of the cloud tops were looking like on Rai. Right now, we've seen a lot of minus 80s, minus 85s. Those brighter yellows there, a few spots of minus 90 trying to peek up through the central desk overcast there of Rai. So Rai definitely trying to put a show of intensification on at this hour. And we have a question coming in. Is it a typhoon or tropical storm? JMA has designated Rai as a typhoon. JTWC has not caught up yet with their latest forecast and advisory. So they still have it as a tropical storm at this time. But JMA is the RSMC in this area, and they have designated it as a typhoon. And we have a question asking, how do we have some of those NOAA maps? Our team scours through a lot of information, a lot of resources to get as much pertinent information up as we can. So we find ways to get some of the graphics that we have available to us. Let's see, what are some other questions we have? I was just retracted, but I think we can still answer. Water temperatures for where Rai is at. I don't think that's something that we have discussed just yet. Pretty sure I can find a temperature map here. Yep, and we have one. So right now, where Rai is at is sitting over roughly 29 and 30 degrees Celsius waters. Definitely more than favorable to fuel a typhoon of this magnitude. Once it does get through the Philippines, you see the waters start to drop off in the South China Sea down to about 24, 25 degrees Celsius. So it's really going to be interesting to see if it's going to hold its intensity once it gets out to the South China Sea up towards Vietnam, up towards Hainan. As you can see, that even up in the Gulf of Tonkin there, just to the west of Hainan, the water temperatures really take a nosedive, getting down to probably about 20 or 21 degrees Celsius there. That's how the water temperatures are looking for Rai at this time. All right. Other questions coming in. Movement speed of Rai as of now. If I remember right, JMA has it moving at 12 knots, 15 miles per hour. So it is moving at a fairly decent pace. And do we think Rai is forming an eye right now? We've seen microwave imagery that would suggest that it's trying to form an eye. Whether it's actually trying to get one going on infrared and satellite, that is really yet to be determined. We could take a look over here at the RAM imagery here as soon as I get it back up, and we could take a look and see if it is trying to form one here. So we could take a look at how it's looking on RAM. And I don't know. I mean, that's how it's looking on RAM. What does our team think? I would say right now it's trying to put one together, but whether or not it's actually getting it really put together or not, I'd say that's still up in the air.
Yeah, I'd have to argue that's up in the air to some degree.
And if my ears to see me, that is our own Thomas Schwent stepping into the studio. How you doing tonight, Thomas? And what are your thoughts on Rai?
I'm doing all right. When it comes to my thoughts on Rai, I mean, I know you were just talking about its structure a little bit. It definitely is trying to get an eye together. Latest microwave would indicate that it definitely has a smaller eye wall. And in the event that it can fight off some of this wind shear it's been dealing with, it could be a serious storm. The JTWC currently has it forecasted to peak with winds of 120 miles per hour on approach to the Philippines. Regardless of excuse me, how strong it gets, the expectation is for a very powerful major typhoon to strike the Philippines. This is going to be a significant rainmaker as well, it looks like. So it looks like all indications point towards a significant typhoon impact for the southern Philippines. Those Signal 1 warnings I know we have in place right now are probably going to get upgraded here in short order if things continue to go the way they're going.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out at least Signal 3s being in place by the time Rai does get towards landfall. Unless it intensifies quicker, then we may see Pagasa pull out Signal 4s, but I can't see them doing that with the way the JMA and JTWC forecasts are going at this current time.
If those are to be believed, if that's what ends up happening, we'll see Signal 3s, but I don't think we'll see Signal 4s. It should be noted that we do have multiple models which have shown this thing becoming extremely intense as it does head towards the Philippines.
Do you have those
Should be
available?
noted that in most recent runs, there has been a step back. So that's the way things are looking right now. There's been a bit of a step back in terms of the intensity the storm will be at when it strikes the Philippines. But it looks like it is going to be a rather intense typhoon. I think a major typhoon is a perfectly reasonable bet right now.
Yeah, do you have those models to show, Thomas?
Oh, yeah, I do. Here we go.
Yeah, that'd be
So
awesome, because I don't think that's the one thing we've really touched on is the models with Rai.
Yeah, so I'll show the H wharf here, and the first thing I'll show is the wind. This is one of our better hurricane models. For those that aren't aware of exactly what this is a research model run by NOAA here in the United States, and this is built for hurricanes and typhoons specifically. So this is a rather good model. It's not perfect, of course. This tends to make storms more intense than they'll actually end up being when it doesn't have recon, and it doesn't right now. But this gives you a good idea of what's going on. You can see here in this latest run again, basically a typhoon at this point right now, with winds 65 knots. Moves forward, becomes more robust, and we have a solid 105 mile an hour Category 2 typhoon off the coast of the Philippines here. This is about a day from now. So about a day from now, we have a solid Category 2 typhoon off the coast of the Philippines, 105 to 110 miles an hour. And you can see here, the H-Wharf doesn't quite take it to major typhoon status in terms of winds. Pressure suggests it might be. So, Category 2 or 3 typhoon, heading into the Philippines. And there you go. You can see it becomes a major. It actually strengthens it in terms of winds while it's over the Philippines, which is rather bizarre. Although it has happened before. And then you can see this rather robust typhoon coming out of the Philippines. Something else that's interesting, I just want to touch on it very briefly, and all models basically show a strengthening typhoon heading into the South China Sea, which is a rarity. So, we'll see what happens there, but in the short term, the threat to the Philippines, it's looking like a major typhoon. If we look at the GFS, similar kind of thing here, strengthening typhoon with time, has it a bit weaker currently than it actually is, so keep that in mind. You want to inflate the wind speeds a bit. So if it's 75 miles an hour now, then it's going to be about 90 to 100 here. And again, we can see here Category 2 or 3 typhoon. Excuse me, heading into the Philippines. So solid, and then again a strengthening typhoon coming out of there. So definitely remarkable, definitely something to watch for sure.
Any other models you have, or is that all we got for the moment?
We got more. Do you want to see more?
Yeah, I mean, we can throw a few more out there. I mean, we got about 40 minutes still left to cover.
Yeah, so let's take a look actually. The GFS and H-Wharf are the two best ones, I believe. So I do actually want to take a look at, and sorry, I have a bit of a cough, so you guys are going to have to deal with that on the stream a bit.
No, not a problem.
I do want to note a trend here. I'm going to go back 4 model runs. First of all, the landfall is sooner, but you'll notice this huge uptick in intensity. a couple of model runs ago. This is a category, and the winds are misleading. This is a category 4 or 5 typhoon right here. And you'll see the intensity ends up going down a bit, 937 versus 929 in millibars, and now we're all the way up to a 955. So the intensity has been fluctuating quite rapidly in terms of just how strong this could get. And the GFS has been doing a similar kind of thing here. It was down to 948 millibars a couple of runs ago. Now it's all the way up to 962. So again, a general trend towards good news, which is that this is going to be weaker than we were initially expecting. So it's definitely something that's good to see. I do want to pull up some rainfall stuff as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, go for it.
The best website to do that, I believe, at least for the GFS, is going to be Windy. So I'm just pulling that up right now. And we can see here, we can actually take a look at the Euro, the GFS, and the icon, which is rather nice. We can take a look over the next 5 days or so. So if we take a look at these right now, this is the GFS, and this is the model which I'm putting the most weight into at the moment for rainfall. So this down here is the track of the typhoon. And you'll see here, in inches, I want to convert this to millimeters so that way people in the Philippines have a better idea of what this is looking like. But you can see here, as we zoom into the Philippines here, near places like Dapa in particular, right along the coast there, over 300 millimeters of rain expected by the GFS. You can see there, Surigao City, 300 millimeters of rain. Widespread 200 to 300 millimeter rain amounts expected by the GFS. Now, something to note is that because this is a lower resolution model, there will be significantly higher local accumulations in there. Take a look at the European model. It shows a very similar story, again, over 300 millimeters in some spots, but widespread 200 to 300 millimeter rainfall throughout the primary corridor, where this ends up going through. And the Euro also picks up a fair bit better on how more mountainous regions are going to deal with the rainfall than the GFS. So I think that this more upper extreme 140 to lower extreme less than 5 is more likely than the GFS's more smoothed out approach. So it's definitely something to keep in mind for sure. And then lastly, we have the icon, and I think it's important just to look at it because it is another model solution. And it shows, again, generally the same thing, kind of favors the GFS solution a bit with higher accumulations across the board. 200 to 300 millimeters of rain looking like the general thing, with locally higher amounts being a possibility. So in the short term, looks like a significant typhoon, a major typhoon, is likely to strike the Philippines, so category 2 or 3.
Can
So
I
it could
interrupt
be
you guys for a
significant to
moment?
major. Sure.
JWTC have actually issued their warning. They have upgraded to winds of 65 knots, that's 75 miles per hour, and they forecast it to be at 90 knots in 24 hours, that's 105 miles per hour, before making landfall in the Philippines, with a secondary peak intensity remaining at 105 knots, that's 120 miles an hour, in around 4 days from now over the South China Sea. That's just out from the JTWC.
Okay. Then I
And
assume
we
we'll get the
do have
graphic
that
in a
new
short
graphic up, so we'll take a look at that just briefly. And yeah,
Do
they're
we have the
now.
new graphic?
Yeah, I was able to do a quick refresh. So yeah, we've got the new graphic up. 65 knots, gusting to 80. Now acknowledging typhoon force winds now extending 40 nautical miles out to the northeast, 15 to the southeast, 20 to the southwest, 30 to the northwest. They do have it peaking at 90 knots in 24 hours. That is very interesting.
Definitely
Yeah,
a quick intensification phase.
What's even
yeah,
more
pretty
interesting,
solid. It's going to be a mid-cat too.
yeah, what's more interesting is looking at 36 and 48 hours out does not forecast a lot of weakening, only down to 85 knots. Then has it intensifying back up, probably primarily back over the South China Sea at 105 knots.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Thomas, but I'm seeing that this will probably weaken more than 5 knots over the Philippines, maybe even more than 10 knots.
So this is what's interesting about the Philippines. The Philippines are an extremely complicated region to forecast for. And the reason is because in order for a tropical cyclone, like especially after it has its structure together, to strengthen. It just needs that ring, that small ring, especially if this is a smaller core, that small ring, that eye wall, to be over water, and it can ramp up with a bit of land interference around. These things have this has happened in the past. I think Typhoon, what is it, Melor is a perfect example of this.
Melor, Fanphone, 2019. Do you have an example?
Yeah, I mean we've had many typhoons in the past uh, do this sort of thing where they actually strengthen over. And then again, if the structure of the storm gets significantly disrupted by land in the Philippines, it's going to weaken by quite a bit. So it's very difficult to predict. I mean, you've had powerful storms ram into it, like again Malor, and then strengthen up 1 or 2 categories while moving through the Philippines. And then you've had storms like Goni, which ram into the Philippines and then just can't get their act together, nearly dead, moving back out over water. And that, excuse me, that has to do with land interaction. So it's a very complicated forecast. If I'm the JTWC, I'm having a very difficult time gauging just what kind of strength changes to expect while it's over the Philippines. I think 5 knots is perfectly reasonable. Will it be 5 knots? Probably not. But there's such a large margin of error because of the complexities of land interaction that I don't think you can go much farther than that.
And we are back on your screen, Tom, so you can keep covering the icon rainfall models there.
So icon rainfall, again, this is check the GFS. So 200 to 300 millimeters of rain locally higher. That's the general consensus with rainfall. We've already talked about winds. JTWC forecasting a Category 2 hit. So Category 2 or 3 typhoon, that's what I'd be expecting if I were in the Philippines. I'd be saying if I'm on the safe side, I'd be preparing as if this is going to be a Category 3. I'm not saying it will be, but I'm saying that you need to be preparing as if it will be. I don't know if we have a CDPS rating on it. Do we have
5.
CDPS on it? Stage 5. So Stage 5 CDPS rating, that's a considerable amount of damage that can be done there. I believe that's in the devastating category in terms of potential damage. So it's no joke for sure. So Stage 5s are going to be able to do solid amounts of damage. They're going to be relatively high in terms of monetary damage. Yeah. But this isn't like an upper echelon thing. This isn't one of those things where you need to panic, you need to freak out or anything. But this is one of those things where I'd suggest making preparations for this kind of stuff now. So if you're in a flood-prone area in the Philippines, if you're along the coast in any area along the Philippines where this typhoon could hit, if you're even inland, if you're in a flood-prone area, things like that. When it comes to water, I'd be preparing for flooding. So that means, things like boarding up your house, knowing where to go to higher ground, stuff like that. And also having supplies, things like 2 weeks worth of food. And so that's 1 to 2 cans of food per person in your household per day for 14 days. So 1 to 2 cans of food times 2 weeks. That's going to be, I'd say about 15 to 20 cans of food per person is probably going to be good. And then you want a gallon of water per day per person. So that's important stuff in terms of supplies. You're also going to want to prepare for the wind factor, the wind and surge factor. Surge factor is very similar to flooding. You want to know how to get to higher ground. You want to be able to have supplies to be able to survive in what could be a pretty devastated area. And then you also want to prepare for the wind. So that's going to be, again, things like boarding up your house. And if you're not in a flood-prone area, that means knowing where to get to lower ground. So things like that, getting softer things like mattresses, pillows, blankets, and even a bicycle helmet and things like that to protect yourself from flying debris. For those of you that are U.S. viewers right now, I know this is sounding an awful lot like a tornado preparations thing, but it's very real. So I'd say if you're in the Philippines and you're in the path of this typhoon, make those preparations now. If it's not so bad, then that's fantastic, and hopefully you'll never need to use the things that you got to prepare for a situation like this. But there is the chance that this does go wrong, and this goes wrong in a quite big way. So I'd be preparing right now if I were in the Philippines for what could be a significant typhoon of Category 2 or 3 intensity. So that's what we're looking at the moment with that. I'd also like to note a couple of other things. Firstly, we and I know it's low, but I do think that we do have to talk to people in Vietnam here for a second. If there's anyone from Vietnam watching, I'd be suggesting right now that you keep an eye on this. There's not much reason to take huge amounts of action right now or anything like that, but I'd be keeping an eye on this. This could be making an awfully close call to your location, especially if you're on coastal Vietnam. So I'd be watching this closely. If you're in the southern side of Vietnam, along the fatter part of the country, if you know what I'm talking about there, that's where I think that there could be some significant wave height increases, significant storm surge, some significant rainfall. It's not looking like a direct landfall is looking overly likely, so I don't think winds are going to be a huge concern. But rainfall and storm surge, I'd be keeping an eye on this over the next few days. No preparations need to be made just yet, but I'd be keeping an eye on things there.
Yeah, speaking of preparations, we do have the general outlook for Rai from Pagasa on screen. They are talking there's a likelihood of tropical cyclone wind signals being hoisted for Visayas, large portions of Mindanao, several provinces, and southern Luzon due to the threat of strong typhoon force winds associated with the passage of Rai. Highest possible wind signal may be hoisted is a signal 3. Localities situated in the eastern portions of Visayas and Mindanao may be placed under signal 1 warnings as early as this afternoon or this evening. Over the next 24 hours, the influence of Rai will bring light to moderate with at times heavy rains over Caraga and Davao Oriental. The passage of the tropical cyclone over the central portion of the archipelago will bring heavy to torrential rainfall over Visayas, Mindanao, and several provinces in southern Luzon, which may bring possible flooding and rain-induced landslides, coastal inundation due to high waves near the coast, and storm surge are also possible for low-lying localities near and along the path of the typhoon. Residents over the northern eastern portions of northern Luzon and the eastern portion of central Luzon are advised to monitor for updates regarding possible heavy rainfall which may occur in relation to the behavior of the shear line during and after the passage of this tropical cyclone. The Pagasa not choosing their words lightly. They are forecasting a peak intensity of around 155 kilometers an hour to be reached by Thursday morning or afternoon, which would be enough for signal 3 warnings.
Yeah, for sure. And just so people know what that is, uh 95 miles per hour. For those of you that use miles per hour, but 155 kilometers per hour, that's
That's
rather significant. And that's rather notable as well. So again,
I sh-
like I know I've been saying a bit, and that is 10-minute, but still rather significant. Ethan, what were you gonna say?
let's say what you just said. That's 10 minutes sustained winds.
Yeah, so
So
again,
you
that's category 2 or 3 typhoon. Um, Pretty consistent here. So we also do have fresh off the press a new CDPS calculation done by Devin Williams himself. So this is as accurate as it gets in terms of CDPS. We currently have a stage 5, holds at stage 5. It should be noted that the wind threat, he has that being significant to perhaps major. So again, a significant to major typhoon in terms of wind speeds. Again, that category 2 or 3 messaging we've been talking about. In terms of size, this thing's looking like it's going to get quite a bit larger over the Philippines. The JTWC actually noting it getting larger before hitting, shrinking in wind field a bit as it gets there, and then becoming massive in the South China Sea, even indicating Vietnam getting tropical storm force winds before the center of circulation is anywhere near them. So major size there, I can agree. Rain, he's saying, is significant to major. So again, that's going to be that moderate amount of rainfall there. So 200, 300 millimeters, locally higher amounts. That looks to be the solid message there. And then finally, a significant to major overall threat being given there, leaning towards major. So he's definitely leaning towards this being more of a major threat to land, which means that this is an upper echelon stage 5. This could be nudging up into stage 6 if forecasted intensities increase much more at this point. So we'll see what happens here. It's going to be a rough couple of days for those in the Philippines. You guys have been through this kind of thing before. You guys know what to do. Just make sure that you're making those preparations. Again, that's things like food, water, knowing your places to higher ground, lower ground, and finding ways to protect yourself from things like flying debris. As long as you have those things in place, um, I can say with confidence you're probably going to make it. So that's the kind of stuff that needs to be prepared for at the moment. Does anyone from our team have any new news regarding this typhoon or anything else in the world of tropics?
I haven't got any sit reps yet from my friends in Eastern Visayas. I'll be sure to update if they got any.
It sounds good.
We have a question in the Philippine stream. Is this typhoon stronger than Typhoon Haiyan? Well, no.
No, not even close.
No. Uh, I've been seeing videos on YouTube overhyping Rai. Like putting it Super Typhoon Odette with 300 km per hour. Those are just fake news meant to scare people.
But we can say with confidence that this storm is nothing even close. The wind speed is less than half. The rainfall isn't going to be as big. Like this storm, it's no joke. It's still something you should prepare for. The my whole thing is that any storm could become your high end when it's right on your doorstep. But the sheer magnitude of Haiyan is something that's going to be unparalleled for a long time. I think that Goni is the closest thing that we've seen to that in recent memory. But this is not going to get anywhere close to the magnitude that Haiyan did. Um, so I wouldn't be scared. Again, as I've said before, this isn't a time to panic. This isn't a time to be scared. This is just a time to prepare. And if you make those preparations, I can guarantee you will make it out of this safely. So that's what's important right now. It's just making sure you're making those preparations. This is going to be a powerhouse. It's still going to be no joke. Again, category 2 or 3. Wind speeds are going to be approaching the I know Pagasa said up to 115 kilometers an hour. So again, no joke. But definitely still something that it's not going to be a high end level threat. I can just say that.
I think some people are not taking this seriously. Even making memes about it.
Yeah, there's definitely there are definitely two camps with this storm. And there's the crowd that's overhyping it, that's talking about this being basically the next big monster that's gonna just ravage wherever it goes. And then you have the camp that's dismissing this. They're saying it's not that strong, it's not that big, it's not an upper echelon typhoon. And the side that's saying that this isn't an upper echelon typhoon, you're correct, it's not, but that doesn't mean that it should be taken any less seriously.
Here's something that has not been touched on, I don't think, and this is right up our wheelhouse for some of our team. Can typhoon cause tornadoes? That's most definitively yes, they can. Now, will they cause any for the Philippines? That's really yet to be determined. We won't know until this actually makes landfall. We see some of the impacts.
So I've never heard of tornadoes with storms that move into the Philippines. It doesn't mean they don't happen. At least to me, it doesn't seem like the Philippines have an overly robust way to document them. And especially given that you're going to be getting significant and to extensive wind damage regardless from the typhoon itself, I think it's going to be very difficult to distinguish what was a tornado embedded within the storm and what was damage from the storm itself. So, yes, it can produce tornadoes, but again, it's that same wind threat. So, regardless of whether it produces tornadoes or not, I think the damage is going to look very similar at the end of the day.
And we've got another question. This is concerning the whole GFS model with 97W, and I'm pretty sure you've looked at the models, Thomas. One viewer hinting that the GFS is hinting that 97W is to cross into the NIO and then back across into the Westpac. Any validity on that?
We can take a look here for ourselves. You can see there's Lady 7W out there in the South China Sea. And we can see here crossing over.
Hey,
So again,
Thomas.
there's our significant typhoon. Yes.
Before you get on with that, I'm just gonna say, the area of interest that they're referring to in the Bay of Bengal, that's actually a different area of interest that does, for some reason, moves eastward. I will say, it's very interesting, but I'll let you see that for yourself.
So I think that the index that they're referring to right now is the one in the West Pac, and they're saying it moves back. But we'll look at the one in the Bay of Bengal here shortly as well.
Hello, can I interrupt?
Go for it.
Sure.
Pagasa has now released Tropical Cyclone Bulletin number 3. They have also upgraded it into a typhoon with winds of 120 kilometers per hour. That's 75 miles an hour. Gustiness of 150 kilometers per hour. And a pressure of 975 millibars.
All right, so it sounds like
And they have-
all three agencies are right in line with that.
We
They
have
are
Tropical
upgrading-
Cyclone.
Yep.
We have Tropical Cyclone Wind Signal number 2, now in the eastern portion of Surigao del Norte and Surigao del Sur. Tropical Cyclone Wind Signal number 1 are raised in Sorsogon, Masbate, the southern portion of Romblon, eastern Samar, northern Samar, Leyte, Biliran, southern Leyte, Bohol, Cebu, Negros Oriental, Negros Occidental, Siquijor, Iloilo, Capiz, Aklan, Antique, and Guimaras.
And what is interesting with these latest signal warning list from Pagasa is they've extended a lot more of their signal ones further north and further west. So those are some new areas. If you're in west of Cebu and northwest of Samar, getting up to Sorsogon, Tisco Island, and Masbate, you guys are now under signal one warnings. So that is new information going out from Pagasa at this time.
Hot off the press, we can also show the cone here real quick. This is their new cone. They're expecting this to remain a typhoon through the Philippines, and they're expecting it to move into the South China Sea as a typhoon before weakening to a tropical storm as it moves north. A severe tropical storm at that. So, definitely some notable stuff. And again, Vietnam, which I noted before, is within their cone. I don't think a direct landfall is overly likely at this point. But I definitely would be considering making preparations at some point soon for this particular storm. So that's what I got right now. In terms of this, we'll see what indeed ends up happening with that. But in terms of the new Pagasa advisory, I don't have much more on that. Does anyone else have new information on what Pagasa's just released?
I do
The
not
new
at this
track
time.
just
Go for it.
New track just makes Rai head for Metro Cebu, which is a majorly populated city in Visayas.
So they have Cebu Metro now being where this typhoon passes over.
Yes.
All right. Well, definitely not good news, but something that again could in fact happen. So definitely something that needs to be kept in mind. If you're in any of the Signal 1 or Signal 2 warnings currently given out by the Philippines, I'd be making those preparations I was talking about earlier right now. So again, that's going to be food, water, supplies, things like that, knowing how to protect yourself from flooding and damaging winds. Those are the important things.
So now that the storm surge in their bulletin, if if I can read it in here.
Yeah, if you can find that storm surge statement from Pagasa, go for it.
Minimal to moderate risk of storm surge reaching up to 2 meters in height may occur in the next 48 hours. Rising seawater, along with the high waves from the shoreline moving inland, may cause flooding in the low-lying coastal localities of Visayas, southern portion of Masbate, Surigao del Norte, Surigao del Sur, Dinagat Islands, Camiguin, Misamis Oriental, and Misamis Occidental.
So that is what we have coming out of Pagasa at this hour. We are going to be on air for about another 15 minutes, so If you have any questions for the team, now's the time to get them in, as we will be wrapping up here at the bottom of the hour, as we were anticipating only going for an hour, but due to the inflow of information coming in at this hour now, we will be going to the bottom of the hour. We will get back over onto Thomas's stream here so he can look back at this 97W system.
Yeah, so this has been this has been, I know, the center focus of a couple people in the YouTube chat. So let's just address this. This is 97W. This is something else that we can address at another time. But you can see it there. This is about just under a day out. And you can see it here, about to pass into the Bay of Bengal. It makes that cross, and you can see it here kind of meandering. You have this kind of lobe now. So while the center is technically there, you have this kind of lobing of moisture, which this elongation, I'd say, is probably the entirety of the invest at this point. You can see an attempt to reconsolidate as it moves into the Bay of Bengal. And then there it is. It tries to move back. It almost splits off. And there it goes. Develops and rams right back in to the Western Pacific. So there you go. That's definitely something interesting, to say the very least. But yeah, this is a little ways out. It shows the system that develops from this developing about 5 days out. So there's a lot of uncertainty with if a system develops and where exactly it would track after that. So definitely an interesting thing that this does move back into the Western Pacific, but it's definitely not a certainty.
And if I'm looking at that right, it looks like
Hey.
that crosses Malaysia, and then would be impacting Thailand at about 7 or 8 days out.
That's correct. This is about 6 or 7 days.
Oh
yeah.
wow!
I would also note that it's not entirely certain that this typhoon will even impact that peninsula, because the Euro does have this system as well, but develops it much farther west and at a very low latitude as well, and sort of stalls it in the southwestern Bay of Bengal and then moves it off towards the east and
Well,
kills
those
it.
aren't the same system. That's from the area of interest in the Bay of Bengal itself. And that develops. This doesn't actually really pick up on the AOI we currently hear. I think it underdoes that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm looking at the models now, Thomas. Literally all the models except the GFS all follow what the Euro is saying, which is
That's fair.
very, very interesting.
But I will say the question did note about the GFS solution of this crossing over and crossing back. So yeah, again, unlikely, but a possibility. So you can see here again that area of interest. The other area of interest, the GFS does something strange with this. It actually takes it and it develops it in the southern hemisphere. It takes this lobe of energy, Fujiwara's it with the lobe in the Western Pacific, and then boom, you have a southern hemisphere cyclone. Very brief, but definitely there. So we'll see what happens. This is a very uncertain and very dynamic setup in the Bay of Bengal into the southern hemisphere. So there's nothing really that's certain, but steering currents definitely could take something in there and then take it back. So it's definitely what we got right now. Tim, do we have any other questions on the line?
Yeah. I mean, one of them being with that 97W concern. Someone's asking, will it become a hurricane? Which for the West Pacific would be a typhoon or a cyclone if it's in the NIO. GFS, I don't think hints at it making that deep of an intensification process, does it?
No, and GFS is the worst case scenario. I want to make that clear. So I'm going to actually show it here just so that we can see whether it's even possible. You can see here down to about 989 millibars, and it looks solidly small. So it's the kind of thing where it's very uncertain what's going to happen, whether it's even going to form at all. If it manages to take advantage, there's a very slight chance that it becomes a lower end or cyclone. And like we're talking just above the threshold. So nothing overly strong, nothing too serious. This isn't going to be one of those category 3, 4, or 5s. But this could be a significant rainmaker and a significant little cyclone for some areas there along Thailand. And in Malaysia.
There is pretty strong evidence to say that sometime in the next within 8 to 9 days, I'd say, just to go beyond a little week period, that there's going to be a hurricane strength. It's not going to be crazy strong, but just a minimal hurricane strength system in the southern Bay of Bengal. That would be what I would say. Which direction it heads and which impacts are a bit uncertain, but that certainly appears to be on the way. Subject to change, of course.
And we have that question in the Philippine stream. What is the signal number in Agusan del Sur? Well, the latest bulletin says it's still in signal number 1. So there you have it.
Yeah, we
What's
actually
that
do
for?
have the latest signal warnings up from Pagasa as of their latest update. We do have those on the screen. If you see your region in blue, you are under signal 1 warnings. If you're in Surigao del Sur, Surigao del Norte, the eastern half, and the Bucas Grande Islands, you guys are under signal 2 warnings now, as of the 11 a.m. update posted by Pagasa. That is what we do have
So
for
I got a
that area.
situation report.
Go for it.
Bohol is now experiencing cloudy weather. It's about to rain, as my friend said in Bohol. There's not much wind going on, but there's definitely cloudy skies.
That makes sense. We've got what looks to be uh, probably a storm that's fired due to the mountainous terrain of the Philippines on one of those first outer bands from the typhoon. So, like, it's not the main corridor of outer bands. There's a slot in there. You're gonna get a bit of a break, but this is directly related to the typhoon.
Yeah, that band you're referring to, Thomas, looked like is blowing through southern Leyte now and getting ready to impact the island of Bohol there. That is the island right there, kind of in the center of your screen there, just for context.
I will say, when it comes to comparing the latest JMA forecast, the hot off the press Pagasa forecast, and the JTWC's latest forecast, they're all in remarkable agreement that this is going to make landfall on Ciago Island. That's very interesting.
I think
It's
most of
not
them,
common.
yeah, I think it may meander just a little bit here and there on it. I think most of them, the previous advisories did have it being more around the Dinagat Islands, which is a little bit north of where it was originally forecasted, but now it looks like maybe with Pegasus information paired in, it is going a little bit further south than what we were initially seeing, which is why we're seeing the signal 2s now in place for the Bucas Grande Islands and Surigao del Sur, and not at the Dinagat Islands, which are still only signal 1s right now.
Yeah, it just shows you that that this thing is going to make landfall somewhere in that region. Of course, we won't know exactly where it makes landfall until I don't know, an hour or so before this makes landfall. But general consensus, it's going to be in that region, though.
All right, Thomas, since you have Windy up, we do have some of you are asking about the wave forecast for the Philippines, if you can access that.
Yeah, we do. So we can take a look at a couple of parameters here. I think I'm going to take a look at just primary wave heights. We'll actually do swells, because swells are going to be much more indicative of what the typhoon is doing.
Yeah, we'll take a look at this, and then we'll probably get everybody's final thoughts.
Good. So swells right now, I want to get this in meters. As we head towards the Philippines here, you'll see a notable increase in these swells. But swell heights, wave heights, looks like up to 6.2 meters. Take a look at waves themselves. We're up to 6.5 meters or so. So Notably large waves here, over 8 meters in some cases, so very high. Waves peak on the European model, one of our better models, about 8.9 feet. They're not feet, I'm sorry, 8.9 meters. Um, the global forecast system peaks to about 9 meters. And the Icon, which is significantly less aggressive, still peaks at about 8. So 8 to 9 meter waves. Definitely a possibility with this, and that's nothing to sneeze at. I think we all know that's nothing to joke about. That's about 27-foot waves for those of us in America. Just to give some perspective to some of those on the live team as to just how high that is. But those are some high waves. So the northern side in particular is going to have to worry about those significant wave heights.
I should note that recent microwave passes indicates that the eastern side of the eye wall is open, which means that this is not a fully complete eye wall right now. And supposedly there's also some dry air in the contained in the core somewhere in the mid levels. So I'd say any strengthening right now was based on those factors is going to be pretty slow. And when you even combine in the wind shear too.
All right, well, we are getting close to the bottom of the hour, so we will get our final thoughts from our team right quick.
All right, well, I guess I'll start. I'm going to make this very brief. There is a typhoon headed for the southern Philippines. This typhoon is going to be a significant one. Significant wind speeds, well over 150 kilometers per hour possible. The storm is going to be a category 2 or 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It's going to be a typhoon when it hits. It's going to produce some significant wind damage, significant to major winds, as per our former chief cyclone analyst, Evan Williams. I'd still say he's the best analyst we have. We also have significant rainfall, 200 to 300 millimeters of rain in widespread fashion, with the local areas getting, I'd say, as much as 450 to 500 millimeters, and that could even be conservative in the most mountainous regions. So significant rainfall as well. Know how to prepare for this. So again, that's food, that's water, that's supplies, that's making sure that you can protect yourself from the debris and wind of this typhoon, my bad. That's going to be moving towards the Philippines, stuff like that. So make sure that you're preparing right now. This isn't going to be some sort of mass casualty, devastating event, but this is going to be a significant typhoon, and it's something that people in the Philippines need to definitely watch closely.
Yeah, my closing thoughts would probably be the same with Thomas with what he says. You know, this isn't going to be a Cat 5 moving into the Philippines, but it's still going to be significant enough that it does bear very close watching.
Any other thoughts from our team before we wrap it up? All right, then to recap, we have Typhoon Rai set on making a collision course with the southern Philippines in the next 12 to 18 hours, possibly 24 hours. Pagasa, JMA, and JTWC all in pretty good confidence that this could be a Category 2 system by the time it does make landfall near the Surigao Islands. Currently a Stage 5 on the CDPS. And you guys have about 12 to 18 hours to get all your preparations done before this storm will be bearing down upon you. Again, those signal warnings currently in effect up on the screen. Signal 2s for Surigao del Sur. Also, Bucos Grande Islands. A bunch of Signal 1 warnings across the Sorsogon, Samar, Leyte, into the Agusan, Bohol, Cebu, and now into the Negros, Oriental, Occidental, and over into the Capiz, Antique, and Acalan and Romblon Islands. So that is what we have going on with Rai at this hour. Again, thank you to this illustrious team consisting of Thomas, Armin, Ken, and Ethan for getting all the information out that we can for you guys so you guys can stay safe and ahead of this storm. Keep an eye on all of our social media outlets, keyword Force13 on Facebook, Twitter, and you can also join the discussion with our team on our Discord page at discord.gg/Force13. That's going to wrap it up for us this evening. You guys stay safe,
Tim,
and stay ahead of this storm. Go!
we do also have a live stream coming up at 12Z.
All
Not
right.
sure what time that is in the Philippines, but that is just
8 p.m.
calculating.
All right. So we will have another
what time
live
did you say?
stream covering Rai here in about 9 or 10 hours. So put that in your schedule if you want to listen in on more on Typhoon Rai. That's going to wrap it up. You guys stay safe.